Most workers are satisfied with their jobs, according to the Employee Benefit Research Institute. And the overall unemployment rate right now is about 4.4%, which is higher than it was in 2023 and 2024. But the unemployment rate for people 55 and older is about 3%. And for people 65 and older, it's just 2.6%, which sounds pretty good. But I think our panelists may have some thoughts about what's behind those numbers. Over 1.2 million people lost their jobs last year, the most since the pandemic. Many of those were at private companies, but many, as you know, were people who worked for the federal government. And I saw a study recently from the Employee Benefit Research Institute. It found that 30% of workers, 3-0, have seen layoffs or reduced hours where they work in the past 12 months. That's up from 2024. And 37% have seen hiring freezes, which is up from 33% in 2024. So not such great news there. Close to a third of job seekers aged 55 and older are what's called long-term unemployed, which means they've been out of work for 6 months or longer. We'll talk about that. There still seems to be quite a lot of ageism by employers, making it hard for people in their 50s and older to get hired. I just read an excellent book that I'd recommend. It's about this, called Too Good to Get Hired, by Isaiah Hankel. And it's about how so many older job seekers are considered overqualified by employers, but overqualified is really just a euphemism. And then the last thing I'll mention is the Trump administration and Congress have been cutting or proposing cuts at the Small Business Administration and programs that help older Americans start or grow businesses. So that's making it a little tougher to become an entrepreneur. So with all that said, let me now turn to the panel. Catherine, Chris, and Carrie, what did you see last year? And if you saw any bright spots, we'd love to hear about them. Catherine, maybe you want to start.
Sure. Thank you, Rich. You've summed up 2025 very, very well. And I think it's going to take a long time for us to really process how profound the changes that we've seen in 2025, many of which will carry into 2026 and beyond. Many of them public policy driven in changes in the economy. But we also see other things happening. As each day passes, we all get a day older, and our population is aging. The baby boomers and Gen X now coming up behind them. The oldest Gen Xers are now 60, which is a big milestone birthday. And we are seeing people staying in the workforce longer, or at least attempting to do so. But the job climate is there's a couple of ways we could look at it. We could look at it as difficult because there's been so many disruptions, or we can wear our optimist hat, which I prefer to do, and that is change brings opportunity. So that's where I'm going to want to focus my comments, because I do see bright spots. And if you can figure out how to navigate those changes and find a little sliver, it may be something entirely new and different, but I believe there's opportunities out there.
Before I turn to Chris and Carrie, I just want to ask Catherine about some of the research you've done at Transamerica. I know you ask workers and employers a lot of questions, and last year there were some really interesting differences between what you were hearing from women and men and from Gen Xers and boomers. Anything you want to say about the research?
Yeah, a couple of things. So an overarching trend we've seen over the years is, looking back over a decade, that people in the workforce are looking to extend their working years, work beyond traditional retirement age, and continued work, say part-time in retirement. And we see those commonly among both women and men. And then generationally, we are seeing some really important differences in what I would call cautionary tales between boomers and Gen Xers, because boomers have blazed the trail in so many ways and looking to work longer, retire later. But we released a report on retirees last month, and the median age that retirees retired is still just 62. And more than half retired sooner than planned, oftentimes due to either personal health issues or employment-related issues. Not because they won the Powerball or they had the financial wherewithal. So that's something as we think about working longer and working into the future, how do we safeguard not only our health, but our employability? And these are
Great.
important lessons for Gen X because they've still got more time.
Thank you. So, Chris, let me ask you, how did 2025 look to you? What caught your eye?
So a couple things caught my eye. I mean, 2025, if you look at the macroeconomic numbers, were pretty good. As you mentioned, the unemployment rate, yes, it climbed up a little, but it's still 4.4%. The economy continued to grow. Stock market went to a record high. If you own your own home, you've probably built up a lot of equity in that home. And so as we go into 2026, there's some reasons why and then of course you had the wild card that kind of overhangs everything, which is this massive investment boom in artificial intelligence, sort of building the artificial intelligence infrastructure. And the investment was so big that that's basically what drove the economy ahead, if you just look at that investment. But I think off of what Catherine was saying, as we go into 2026, so none of just because we gone the calendar year, nothing's changed overnight. People are, you still have those trends in place, but this frozen labor market is a growing concern. And you mentioned earlier, Rich, about the long-term unemployed. So younger people graduating from college are having a hard time getting work or the kind of work that they want to be doing. And older people who lose their jobs are very quickly joining the ranks of the long-term unemployed, and that number has been climbing. However, the other side of this frozen labor market is that if you have your job, you've been keeping it, but people aren't leaving their jobs either. So the underlying dynamism of the labor market as we go into 2026 really concerns me. And the other thing that concerns me is the sort of radical uncertainties that are out there. And I don't, Greenland, tariffs, mass deportations. And, I'm in Minnesota, and so I've been doing reporting on the effect of the mass deportations on the Minnesota economy. And basically, a lot of businesses, they've shrunk their hours. They're not hiring. They're not investing. And many of them are closed at this point. These are mostly small businesses. So we're in an environment where I think the real thing to focus on is the labor market, and there are some weaknesses in the labor market. But if you have a job right now and you're an older worker, the fact of the matter is you're probably a pretty valuable employee.
Before I turn to Carrie, Chris, what did you see last year for older entrepreneurs and people starting businesses or growing businesses? Was it a good time, not so good? What was going on?
I think this trend is growing, and it was a good time. And a lot of it has to do with the difficulties, as you mentioned earlier, Rich, about ageism, and the difficulties people have getting through the algorithms. And everybody has trouble getting through the algorithms. But also, how much more do you want to do 50 hours of work for 40 hours pay? Or, do you want to still be doing what you've been doing? So, and there are more resources to tap into. The federal government has cut back on its, but in many communities, they're co-sharing workspaces, they're places where people are gathering. So there are a lot of resources out there, the Kaufman Foundation. And so I think this bringing in some income, start being self-employed. I think what we are seeing is a lot of solopreneurship, and that is continuing to grow. Technology has made that somewhat easier. So that is one of those trends that will continue to grow, continue to unfold, and it's something to keep a very close eye at. And you said, well, what are you optimistic about? That to me is probably the thing to be the most optimistic about. It may be a negative reason why you're doing it. You may have lost your job and you didn't want to lose your job. You may have wanted to get another job. You're not getting another job, but nonetheless, this is a viable option for many people.
Thank you. And Carrie, how did 2025 look to you, and what did you see happening for older workers and older job seekers?
Yeah, thanks, Rich. I just have to piggyback on what the other two have said. I didn't see anything really different than they did. I mean, there's clearly lots of layoffs, particularly in Washington, D.C., where I am. There were people taking early retirements, maybe at a faster rate than previously. There's a sense of precarity in the air. I mean, people are just a bit nervous, like eggshells, if they're still in the workplace. If they're an older worker, they're definitely, just as Chris said, they got it. I mean, if you're there and you've got that job, don't blink, don't let yourself get complacent, because yes, you really are valued at this stage, because there are employers, many are afraid to hire new people at this stage. They don't know where the economy is actually going or what the different rules are going to be moving forward. So they're grateful to have the experienced workers, but at the same time, you as the older worker have got to dig in. You have to, and I've seen this over and over again, adding new skills, reaching out to younger coworkers, building alliances with people, not being afraid of the AI and the new technology. Where I work, AI is the name of the game. I mean, that's the biggest thing going on at my company, but I'm not afraid of it. In fact, I just play around with it. I try to expand how I use it in my own work and get comfortable so I'm not intimidated or fearful of it. And so I can have a discussion with somebody within the company about it in a way that doesn't look like I'm, on another planet. So I think it's really important for older workers to embrace their experience, but also embrace the fact that there are things they don't know, and they need to continue constantly adding new things to their wheelhouse.